In this video, we're going to do a portrait of a male. I love shooting men, I love editing men, but I don't get very many opportunities to do it. As always, I'm in Adobe Camera Raw, and if you click down here, you can see these are my Camera Raw preferences, and my color space is Pro Photo, resolution's 300, 16-bit, and open in Photoshop as a smart object. So the first things we're going to do is we're going to pull up the exposure a bit to about there, pull up the blacks to about there. I'm actually going to pull the highlights down just a bit more. I'm also going to reduce the temperature, make it a little bit cooler. But we can see that I didn't light him with a hair or a rim light. So what I think the best thing to do with this is to make sure that we go into our masking feature. We're going to select our background. And I'm sorry if you hear a cat meowing. My husband's outside shoveling snow and his kitty is losing her mind. Okay, so now we're just going to increase that exposure just to give a little bit more separation between the subject and the background. Something like that looks pretty good. And we're going to go back to our basic menu up here, and we're going to increase our clarity just a bit more. Right about there is probably good. Checking out our histogram. Everything touches each side, so that should be okay. I'm also going to reduce the whites just a bit, right about there. Now if we come down to our color mixer tab, we can decrease the saturation of the oranges a bit. And I'm also going to go into the hue, and I'm going to just pull those reds over to the orange a little bit because his face appeared a lot more pinkish red than orangey red. So that looks pretty good right about there. Click open, and now we have our smart object in Photoshop. I'm just gonna crop this in a little bit tighter. I don't want to cut off his hands. Rotate it a little bit to the right about there. Bring that down so that we don't crop out his hands. Right about there looks pretty good. Click enter or return. I'm going to go ahead and flatten, duplicate my layer, and we're just going to grab the healing brush tool, and we're going to just get rid of some of his blemishes. And we can see from this shot as well that the focus is more or less on the edge of his jaw and not on his face, but we can fix that. So we're just going to sample over here and start getting rid of some of these spots. Just choose a portion of the skin that doesn't have a blemish when you're choosing where to sample from. Usually I don't do a whole heck of a lot of retouching on men, just the glaring blemishes, and that's typically about it. But yeah, you can see the focus is clear on his ear and on his jaw, so focus was missed on his face. But we will fix that. I'm gonna go ahead and zoom out to see what else I need to kind of touch up. He does have some scarring on his face, but you know how it is. We like scarring on men. Makes them look manly. So manly. And I'd say that's pretty good. Okay, go ahead and flatten. Now we definitely need to do a little bit of dodging and burning before we start sharpening. So open up a curves adjustment to dodge burn layer, or you can use the dodge burn tool that comes with Photoshop. It's entirely up to you. But I'm just going to reduce my flow down to 1% and make sure that I have a soft brush. And now wherever you see shadows, reduce your flow to 1. Wherever you see shadows that perhaps pull your eye away from the subject or look like they need to be worked on, I'll just gently remove some shadows using this technique, which is one that I use all the time. We're just going to lighten the shadows. Like so. And this, we're going to actually burn it down a bit so that it doesn't stick out so far. This is the best technique to even out skin without destroying the texture. I find that it works the best. When you do this, you're going to notice that you're going to have some different color discrepancies in the image, and that's okay. There's ways to get around that. And also, if you look here, these should be lightened. He's got pretty deep set eyes, so this is a common occurrence with people with deep set eyes, right? Again, you can see the color discrepancy that's taking place by doing this. But we're going to drastically affect the colors in this image, so we're not worried about it right now. Same thing with this one. And you'll see in my last video that I did with the 3 little boys, these are very similar techniques. So there's not going to be a lot of difference in this, except this one I'm not going to convert to black and white. Okay, let's take a look. That's before, that's after, and now we're just going to reduce our fill till it looks a little more blended before and after. And I'd say that looks better. Flatten your image. Blank layer, we're going to grab our clone tool and we're going to reduce our opacity down to 35 or so, and we're going to have our flow around 70. And now what we're going to do is just come and zoom in, sample out area about here, and we're just going to oh so gently start just kind of blending these different skin areas together. Like so. This just helps blend and get rid of some of those color issues from doing the dodging and burning. Okay. Before and after. So now we've just gotten rid of more of those inconsistencies. Now we're going to flatten. We need to add some light into his eyes, so we're going to duplicate our layer. We're going to go down to adjustments, choose exposure, and we're going to bump up our exposure. We're only looking at the eyes. So something about +5. We're going to invert that. Command or Control I. Grab a soft brush. Pull it up to about 30. I know it looks ridiculous right now, but that's okay. And then just reduce our fill, something like that. Zoom out so you can see. So that looks not too bad. I think it's too light on the left eye still. So reduce, switch to a black brush, and just reduce that white a little bit. Before and after. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now we're going to come in here. We're going to duplicate our layer again. And we're going to go filter, unsharpen, mask. So 20 amount, 20 radius, click OK. Hold down your Alt or Option key, click mask, grab a white brush, and you're just going to paint this effect only on his skin. And this is the first sharpening layer. We're trying to get some, not only contrast, but a little bit more detail back into his skin because it was fairly soft. Something like that. Flatten. Duplicate your layer. We're going to come into linear light right down here. And now we're going to go filter other high pass. Probably 2.5 is good. Invert that mask and you can really see how much better this looks, sharpening up his skin. You can see that I'm purposely avoiding this cheek right here because it's already sharp and we don't want to really draw a lot more attention to that acne area or that scarred area. But I do prefer images of males to be a little bit over sharpened. I find that it just ends up looking cool. And tattoos as well. We want to really sharpen that up because it's a cool feature. Nothing wrong with bringing detail into his forearms. Okay. So that's before and that's after. It's a significant difference. And flatten. You know, this gray on his whatever that is, shirt, I guess, is a little distracting to me. So this is what I would do. I would highlight it, like I would select it. Should be relatively simple enough to select because it is a lighter color on black. And then just zoom in to make sure that your selection is actually accurate. And you're going to have to grab your lasso tool and just refine it. So if you hold down your Alt or Option key, that's a subtraction selection. And if you hold down your Shift key, then that's adding it back. So this is how I typically refine selections. And after you do this, you're going to have to zoom right in and make sure that your selection is really, really refined. So don't be afraid to go over the black portion a little bit because you are going to use a gradient overlay, which is going to really help. You just have to make sure that your selection includes anything that is lighter, because if you don't select the lighter area, then it'll show through on the mask. Not worried about it over selecting, I'm worried about it under selecting. That's the fear with this. Like right here, it has to be selected. Okay, that should be all right. And now, adjustment layer, gradient map. Click on the gradient map. On the far left-hand side, you're going to choose a black color, like this. And then on the far right-hand side, we're going to choose a darker gray color as well. little bit lighter than black though, just so that we can get some shine. Okay, that is good, but now you can see we still have to refine like I talked about before. So grab your soft brush again, and you're probably going to want to reduce your flow to about 50. And then when you come in, you can just paint over those areas. And don't worry about going too much onto the shirt below. You just have to make sure those edges are all selected and painted in. Okay, so now we have done our gradient overlay for getting rid of that. And all you have to do is just reduce your opacity just a little bit. And then you can come into your properties and you can feather that mask out. It should help a little bit. Okay, so I find that to be less distracting. It looks a little bit better. Might actually increase that opacity just a bit, something like that. And that's, you know, that's just better. It's less distracting, and now he's more of the focus. All right. Now the next thing we're gonna do is add a curves adjustment layer. So on the left-hand side, we're just gonna pull those shadows down a bit, right about there, and pull those highlights up just a smidge, not too terribly much. Before and after. We're going for a very moody look, right? And we're just gonna go ahead and flatten that. And now the next thing that we want to do, we can see when we reduce the reds in the camera raw portion that it took the reds out of his lips as well. So we're just gonna go color balance as a new adjustment layer, and we're just gonna add some red back and a little bit of yellow. So about +12 and -5. And invert that, Command or Control I. Zoom in a little bit so that you can see his lips, and we're gonna paint a little bit of color back onto them. There's a fine line between, you know, applying too much so that now he looks like he's wearing lipstick. But I like to start this way and refine it after I've painted it on. So I can see here that I need to do some more refining. So I'll try pulling the reds up a bit. It's too red, it's not enough magenta. So add some magenta back and less yellow. That's probably a better look, but we definitely need to reduce that fill so that it's not too lipsticky. Let's see, before and after. Yeah, I'd say that's better. Not quite so grayish purple. All right. Now, you can see that this isn't true Rembrandt light because we really don't have a lot of light on his right cheek, but I still want to make it a little bit more moody. So we're going to do some more dodging and burning. White brush, flow down to around 3 or 4. Just add a little bit of light because his arms do appear to be a little darker. And this hand looks way darker than this arm. Let's just look at the before and the after. So now we've added some light, and we'll feather that out. Make sure you are on your mask, feather it out. And now just reduce the opacity a little bit. And right there, it looks about good. Okay, flatten. Now we're going to add a texture. But before we add the texture, we're just going to get rid of that line that's between the wall and the back floor drop. So duplicate your layer, grab a patch tool, and we're just going to just really quickly blend those together like so. It's not going to be noticeable once we apply the texture, but it's a good habit to get into regardless. Now we're going to add a texture. So we're going to open it, and I'm not in love with the color, but that's okay. We can adjust. So just transform and pull it over your entire image like so. And at this point you could reduce the vibrancy of this color. We're going to start by using overlay or soft light, probably soft light. But again, because it's so orange, we're going to come up to image adjustments, vibrance, and we're going to reduce that. So right about there looks good. That's perfect. And then all we're going to do is add a mask, grab a black brush, and just paint it off of our subject. It's probably one of the easiest things to do if you shoot on, you know, a dark gray background, is just to go throw in a texture after, because it really helps with the drama in the image. Now I'm not going to get too crazy with making sure that I've painted all of the texture off of him, but you get the gist of what I'm doing, right? So this is my soft light overlay blend mode. I do tend to go over the face and the skin quite a few times just to make sure that I got it all off of the skin. Feather that mask out a bit. You can look at your mask and you can see too if it's solid black or if it's got some white or gray portions that you might have missed when you were painting it off. And I can still see some, but this is good enough for now. Okay, go ahead and flatten. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take this image into exposure. So duplicate your layer. We're going to go into exposure software, and we're just going to add some film presets to it. And after that, we'll do some color grading, and he's done. So we definitely want a preset that minimizes the orange and the red, right? Because this one, you can see it really has enhanced the orange and the reds, but we really don't want that. So if we look over here, we're in the color films print, and I'm going to look for something that's a lot less vibrant like this one, but it's not contrasty enough. But we can go in and we can adjust that ourselves. So as we all know, exposure really ramps up the grain, so we're really going to pull that grain down and the roughness. I tend to want a little bit more grain in the highlights and the midtones because we want to make sure that the skin still looks like it's got texture. But we definitely want to make this more contrasty, right? So in this curves adjustment, we're reducing those shadows and darks. I'm just going to use 1 point. I'm not going to use 2. That looks really cool. And we can see here in our saturation levels that everything looks pretty decent to me at this point. We pulled the shadows up. Highlight can come down just a bit. White's down just a smidge. And probably pull those blacks up a little bit, and we might even increase the clarity by 8, something like that. So if you hold your space key down, you can see the before and the after, so you can see how much it really does do. It's quite significant. And I'm just going to zoom in because I want to make sure that the grain is not too incredibly strong. I'd say that looks pretty good. The clarity might be a bit much. Take it down to 3. Sharpening can be reduced a bit. Okay, that's a good start. Click apply. All right. So the next thing that I always do is I go to my levels just to check my histogram, and I knew that because we did reduce those highlights and everything that they would appear to be far too dull. Now when I start pulling this up, the highlights on his face go up substantially, whereas the rest don't really have the highlights, right? And I'm okay with that. But I do want to increase a little bit more brightness in the general. So if we pull this all the way to where the histogram says it should go, it looks overblown, so I'm just going to reduce that by pulling the one below it so that it minimizes it a bit. So if we look at the before and the after, that's pretty good. I do like the dimness around, so I'm going to just paint back some of the dark on the sides here. I just think it looks a little bit more dramatic if we have the sides a little darker. Okay, before and after, feather that mask out, flatten. Now we're going to go into color toning, add some, look up color tables and see if we can't make this look cooler than cool. So adjustment, color lookup, we're going to go to our load 3D LUT and we're going to start with, I would like to do, let's try film stock. And then what we're going to do is come into our fill and reduce that down. And I do find that a lot of these presets, like it's at 9%, but it adds just that little bit of pop, right? We're gonna go back, another color lookup table, and this time we're gonna do, let's try teal orange plus contrast. Same thing, reduce our fill. And I like this. So you can see how it's really reduced the oranges and added some cooler tones. Another color lookup. This time we're going to go to, I don't want to do night from day because it's going to be, let's try moonlight. This one's going to be about 12. We're going to do one more color lookup. Foggy night. I love this one. And reduce this one all the way probably to about 17 or so. Okay, so we're going to go to our background layer down here, duplicate it, and we're going to merge all of those color lookup tables to our background copy. So merge. And this is helpful because then you can see the difference of what you did by clicking it on and off. And I really do prefer all of those color lookups. I think it's just made this a more unique, interesting portrait as opposed to being too overly warm. But again, we need to go into our levels because we need to check out our histogram again. And once again, we can see that it needs to be brought up. And we're going to pull those blacks down as well, right about there. And you can add in a little bit of matte, but if you add in matte like this, make sure you pull your blacks over again because we don't want it to look too washed out. So if you go back to your layers, you can see here now that we've really increased the brightness. So we'll just zoom in. So this is before the levels adjustment, this is after. And yeah, that's it. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any comments, feel free to leave them below. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video.